afternoon. It's Wednesday, March 30th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. A potentially new political corruption case is brewing. Interior Minister and Shas Party leader Aryeh Deri has once again found himself in the eye of the storm, facing allegations of possible wrongdoing. News of the case was first announced last night on Channel 2, which reported that a preliminary investigation of corruption charges was launched against a senior politician. Without announcing any names, it was said that details of the probes were withheld from the public under a court-imposed order. Shortly after, Aryeh Deri named himself as the politician being questioned by the Attorney General for a possible crime and said he was completely surprised by the reports linking him to possible corruption charges. Speaking today ahead of a scheduled address before a conference in Jerusalem, Deri said he intends to fully cooperate with the investigation and requested that things be conducted as quickly as possible in order to clear his name. He said he will continue to work during this time. Deri previously served a jail sentence for a corruption conviction involving bribes during his first term as Interior Minister in the late 1990s. His reappointment to the post in the current government was met with fierce criticism from opposition members and anti-corruption movements. In a separate development, the Haaretz newspaper announced that another politician is being investigated for less severe corruption charges involving suspicions of illegal political funding from an outside source. The military court in Castina has extended until tomorrow the remand of the IDF soldier who shot a disarmed Palestinian terrorist in Hebron last week. The prosecution, which requested that the soldier be held for an additional 9 days, claims there are numerous contradictions and questions regarding the soldier's account of what happened, discrepancies which require a more thorough investigation. Following a hearing that lasted over several hours yesterday, it still remains unclear what charges the prosecution intends to file: murder, manslaughter, or otherwise. The soldier's attorneys requested that he be held under house arrest or at least confined to a military base. The shooting has triggered a widespread public outcry, with many politicians and citizens calling for the soldier to be released and not stand trial for performing his duty. Responding to the Hebron shooting, IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot said today that he will continue to back every soldier who makes errors in the heat of battle against an enemy who endangers the lives of citizens and soldiers. At the same time, the Chief of Staff stressed that the Army will not hesitate to seek justice from soldiers and commanders who stray from the operational and moral IDF code of conduct. Eisenkot said preserving the spirit of the IDF and its values is not a right, but an obligation. He noted this was highly important in order to maintain the IDF as the army of the democratic Jewish state. His remarks were conveyed in a special written greeting sent to IDF soldiers in the aftermath of the affair. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas demands that justice be served over the Hebron shooting. Abbas made the comments during a meeting with an Israeli delegation from the Federation of the Jews of Morocco, who traveled to Ramallah to personally meet him. We get more in this report from IBA's Ari O'Sullivan.
With no negotiations with the current Israeli government on the horizon, PA leader Mahmoud Abbas is trying to revive the peace process directly with the Israeli public. Organized by former MK Talib Hassana, a delegation of International Federation of Jews of Morocco visited the Muqata in Ramallah earlier this week. Abbas told them that his aim to speak to Sephardi Israelis was not an attempt to fracture the Israeli public, but rather an attempt to reach a dialogue due to their common history and culture. There are many common things between us and the Jews of Arab lands, like language, art, and geography and music. He noted that he listens to Israeli singers every day. He also took the opportunity to demand justice over the killing of a disarmed Palestinian attacker by an IDF soldier in Hebron. The delegation was led by top Moroccan Israelis, including Sam Ben Shetrit, who said he received the permission and even encouragement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The delegation delved into dialogue with the PLO chairman. Some, like former Justice Minister Professor Shimon Shetrit, spoke in their mother tongue, Arabic. He said he was delighted to hear that there would be more such meetings. Rabbi Avram Golan even gave Abu Mazen a blessing. And he was presented with a bronze bust made by Shmuel Ben Ami, similar to the ones he had made for Israeli presidents. This isn't the first nor the last time the Palestinian Authority has arranged meetings with the Israelis. But how much it helps to dissolve the uncertainty and lack of confidence between the two sides remains to be seen.
Western powers are demanding that the UN Security Council take action over Iran's recent ballistic tests. The United States and its European allies are accusing Tehran of defying a UNSC resolution that endorsed last year's historic nuclear deal. In a joint letter to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the U.S., Britain, France, and Germany charged that the missiles used in the recent launches were inherently capable of delivering nuclear weapons. The four Western powers expressed concern that Iranian military leaders have reportedly claimed the missiles are designed to be a direct threat to Israel. The group asked that the Security Council discuss appropriate responses to Tehran's failure to comply with its obligations and urged Ban to report back on the matter. Council diplomats expressed doubt that the case would mandate new UN sanctions. Russia, a permanent council member with veto power, said it did not back the claims and that the missile testing did not constitute a violation of the resolution. Just a reminder, earlier this month, Iran fired several missiles which had the words "Israel must be wiped out" written on them in Hebrew. Joining me now in the studio to discuss latest developments is Professor Avram Diskin, political science expert from the Academic Center of Law and Silence. Thank you, Science. Thanks so much for joining us. Professor, let's begin with the news of the possible corruption cases surrounding two senior politicians. Since we only know about the Interior Minister, Deri, how do you see the latest scandal playing out?
Well, we don't know. It really depends on what kind of charges are going to be, if at all. But definitely, if it's going to develop in that direction, anything is possible. We have to remember that although usually narrow government tend to be quite durable and quite stable, we already have quite a number of problems with the present government. There are three quite problematic members of the Likud itself. There are the public opinion polls flattering the Jewish Home Party, which may lead, to some kind of wild conclusions of Bennett. And we don't know how Shas is going to react if something does develop. So we'll really have to wait and see. We don't know yet what's going on. And I hope that, of course, all our politicians are just as pure as snow and white. But we'll have to wait and see. We have some very unfortunate precedents involving Deri himself in the past.
Can he continue to work under such allegations against him and under investigation?
There are laws, I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to judge, because the Supreme Court previously really violated existing laws, for instance, with the three mayors, and asked them to sustain their mayorship against two laws, actually, that existed then. And then, some law corrected the decision retroactively, which is a scandal. So I don't know how the court is going to behave. It's really unpredictable in Israel, but according to the law, I don't see yet any problem. We'll have to wait and see what the developments are there charges, etc.
Is the decision whether to investigate Deri going to be the first real test for Attorney General Avichai Mendelblit, who entered his post just in January?
No, I think, his hands are already full. We have, for instance, the last decision of the Supreme Court concerning the gas issue, which is also quite a problematic decision, and different judges, gave different decisions, and even those who came to the same conclusion gave, I would say, contradicting reasons for their decision. And he already made a move on that issue. So it's not an easy task to be Attorney General in Israel, and it's not his first test, I think.
Turning to another political issue, the suspension law that just passed its first reading in the Knesset this week, which allows a majority of 90 MKs to suspend their colleagues. Can such a bill really have any weight, and what are the chances that all 90 MKs will unite on such a matter?
First of all, I have to say that I think that it's an unnecessary law. The main problem is really, once again, with the Supreme Court, because in the past there were a couple of cases where a huge majority of the Electoral Committee decided not to let some candidates to participate. And there is a law, there is the 7A clause in the Knesset basic law, which deals with that. But the Supreme Court decided to overrule the decision of the politicians, headed by a Supreme Court justice. So we don't know. I think it's an unnecessary law. What the Knesset really should do is to find some way to balance in a different way the powers of the three branches of power. It's really not acceptable that such an authority versus the executive and versus the legislative is taken by the Supreme Court. And this law is not going to help much because there are going to be appeals whether the law is really constitutional, and if it is accepted, once there is a decision, it's going to be appealed again to the Supreme Court. So the main problem is it's a declarative, in my opinion, it's a declarative unnecessary law, and that's not the appropriate way to deal with the problem.
Why is the Prime Minister so set on trying to get it passed then?
You have to ask him. I think, I really think that he's a very smart person. I think that he understands the problems. And I think that he's trying to do whatever is possible to avoid the clash with the judiciary on one hand, but still not to lose its popularity amongst right-wing voters on the other hand. So maybe that's the reason. I really cannot explain that. I think it's a mistake.
You just mentioned Netanyahu and his popularity. This month marked 10 years in power. There have been discussions from many opposition members on how to make this fourth term his last. Is there any way to really oust him, or should they just accept the fact that this is what really the majority of the public wants, and that's Netanyahu in power?
As a matter of fact, I think that the majority is really in the center. If we talk about the most important issue, and that's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I think that most people are ready to be very generous to the Palestinians, are really open to have a Palestinian independent state, but at the same time don't believe that we really have the partner. That's also my opinion. I think you have to be generous, you have to pay any price, but unfortunately what we have, by the way, the most moderate Palestinian leadership ever, is still not really necessary to make the move. That's where the public stands. I think that Yair Lapid actually, after losing, quite some power in the last elections, really paves the way in the appropriate direction. I don't know if it's because he came to his senses or because he relies on public opinion polls that investigate the issue. But I think that's the way to go. You really have to say, we want peace, we're ready to have the price, but we have enemies, including, by the way, in Israel, Israeli citizens, of course the Palestinians, not to mention Iran, that was mentioned before in this program, that are not ready to accept the right of Israel to exist, at least not the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. That's where we have the problem.
Professor Avram Diskin, always great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Israel and China have vowed to advance innovation cooperation. China's Vice Premier Liu Yandong has arrived in the country to discuss the plan. The Chinese leader has so far held separate talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Reuven Rivlin. The two countries hope to establish a free trade zone and have agreed to enter negotiations on the matter. Liu said China sees Israel as a vital partner in a wide variety of fields. She said her visit was mainly focused on the future, stressing that while her country is under pressure, it remains the engine of the global economy. For his part, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the planned cooperation will astonish the world.
I was delighted to hear today from Vice Premier Liu that China is prepared to begin free trade agreement negotiations with Israel. This is a momentous development, and we are ready to do so right away. We have so much that we can do together. We discussed the various fields in which this can happen: in healthcare, in remote education, in agriculture, in marine agriculture, in IT, in every field of human endeavor. The cooperation between Israel and China can yield enormous results. And we believe that Israel can be a perfect partner for China's plans to move its people upward, and I think move the world upward.
Israeli Arabs today held a general strike marking the 40th land day. Several protests were held against government house demolitions and the threat of the evacuation of unrecognized illegal Bedouin settlements in the Negev. The main event is taking place at this hour in the northern town of Arabe. A separate rally is also scheduled later this evening in the Bedouin village El-Khiran in the Negev. Land Day is held on this day annually to commemorate the deaths of 6 Galilee Arabs during riots that were sparked by a government decision to confiscate land in 1976. Last week's deadly suicide bombing in Brussels has pushed one person to make Aliyah. Walter Benjamin, a Belgian Jew, was on his way to Israel to visit his daughter when the explosions went off at the airport terminal. Benjamin was wounded in the attack, losing a part of his leg. He said that when he recovers from his injury, he would immigrate to Israel. His daughter is already in the country and is preparing to enlist in the army. The wounded father said the bombing made him realize that he wants to live close to her. As soon as he's able, he plans to come and find a small apartment and begin his immigration process. Israel's medical marijuana industry is booming. Its liberal and progressive research is drawing entrepreneurs from around the world who are seeking ways to invest in this developing field. IBA's Ari O'Sullivan has more.
Israel is considered at the fore of medical cannabis research and innovation because of its flexible and progressive regulations. Investors, scientists, and innovators from around the world have come to this country to examine the pot-com industry.
I see money in the room. Billions of dollars came to see what's going on in Israel, and they, unfortunately, in 2 days we can only show the tip of the iceberg, but it gets them excited enough to actually put their money behind what's going on in research here.
Since 2014, U.S. companies have invested about $50 million in licensing Israeli medical marijuana patents, cannabis agrotech startups, and firms developing delivery devices such as inhalers. This number is expected to double in the coming year. American investors say federal regulation in the U.S. prevents cannabis study, creating an absurd situation.
If you're in California, or you're from the state I'm from, Colorado, you're getting medical marijuana. You're getting it from, in a lot of cases, somebody who did not graduate high school. They're making your medicine. There's no science, there's no anecdotal evidence. Israel's a leader in agriculture. And then you take that and couple it with what Professor Meshulam did at Hebrew University and continues to do, and other researchers. You have the two sides. You have the plant sciences, and you have the pharmaceutical development and real science.
Professor Raphael Meshulam is considered the world's pioneer in the study of medical cannabis.
Cannabis is very promising, but it is difficult, it's complicated, and if somebody thinks that he can get into medical cannabis and make millions tomorrow morning, it's, from my understanding, not so simple. He has to be based on good science, well, maybe good business practice and so on, but which should be based on good science.
Seth Yakatan from California says he came because the level of capital efficiency in Israel was high.
We find that the level of capital efficiency here is great. There's an industrious group of people here. What you could take and spend $500,000 on in the U.S., you could usually get for $125,000 or $150,000 in Israel, and it's going to be done efficiently and on time. So I find that the quality of the research here is world class. The arbitrage of value is good.
In Israel, about 23,000 people have health ministry permits to purchase medical cannabis from 9 suppliers. Cannabis helps ease chronic pain, and research is being done to see its effect on Crohn's disease, colitis, and even autism. Whatever the future holds for medical cannabis, Israel is sure to have a major role to play in it.
In local money matters, shares were up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange while the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading. Here are the numbers. Well, it was already feeling warmer today, and another rise in temperatures is predicted tomorrow. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. And And that's all for this newscast. Ari O'Sullivan will be here tomorrow, same time, same channel. Make sure to join him. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.